if you own something and you have the ability to, put in processes and control, you can not only drive your cost way down, but your end product becomes much better. So we found that, we're able to do these renovations for 50 to, 70% cheaper than what it would cost us to go contract it out and hire a construction company. So that was number one. But on top of that, we're found that our leasing is way better. We're able to hit our rent premiums much easier. Our downtimes on units are much quicker. So we're not having to sit there and wait a month for a unit to get renovated before we can lease it back up. It's half that time. So all that translates into better return for the investors.
Welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast, hosted by Eric Nelson and brought to you by Wild Oak Capital. Eric is a real estate investor, business owner, and performance coach. Throughout this series, Eric explores the mindset behind why certain investors are so successful and how we can learn from their achievements and failures. Eric asks the tough questions around the habits, discipline, mindset, and more required to achieve the most ambitious goals. Thank you for being here and enjoy the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Eric Nelson. Yet again, today I have my brother Ben co-hosting. Ben, thanks for being here.
Yeah, excited to have you.
And today we have two awesome guests, and I'll let you guys introduce yourself. So this is what we normally start with. Basically, can you give us your background, your story, what led you to real estate? And Mark, I'll let you go first, and then Josh, if you could follow.
Sure. I'm Mark Shuler, and I am a practicing architect with about 35 years of experience. I'm based out of Seattle. I've done literally hundreds of projects, both in the Puget Sound and around the country. And been doing that for a long time. And then about 15 years or so ago, got really interested in real estate and pursued an advanced degree at the University of Washington in commercial real estate development, probably in 2002, I think I did that. So maybe a little longer than 15 years ago. And then really it's been in the last 8-9 years that I have gotten very serious about investing and doing deals, syndications in particular. Settled in on apartments. And at this point, I've probably done 12 or 14 deals. I've got, number of deals I've done with Josh, but I've got 2 or 3 I'm doing on my own right now in various parts of the country. So kind of a deal junkie, love the game, love the pursuit, love the analysis, the rehab. I love everything about it. So hope to be retiring from architecture here at the end of 2022 and just pursuing this full time.
Awesome. Yeah, that's I think we all can probably, I'm guessing we can all align with the deal junkie comment, but yeah. Josh, I'll let you go. If you don't mind, do kind of the same thing.
Sure. My name is Josh Welch. I am the founder and managing principal of Three Pillars Capital Group. We are a multifamily value add shop here in Houston, Texas. So all of our properties, pretty much everything we've done so far is all in Houston. Got about 2,200 units to date in just under 5 years. And about $250 million portfolio value. And it didn't just happen in one, click of the fingers. I mean, it took a while to get there. And, my background personally was, I have an engineering degree, University of Michigan, go Blue. So I did that. I worked in that sector for a number of years and kind of bridged the gap into institutional finance, where I was a quantitative developer. I also did some institutional banking stuff, portfolio management. So that's kind of where I get the finance piece of how this whole thing makes sense and how we underwrite our deals. But even while I was still doing the corporate thing, I had single family rentals that I was doing in Florida. And so I had a portfolio I was building there, and I was like thinking, you know what, I'm making a lot more money than I am working the corporate thing. Let's branch out and let's really expand on this. And I also saw that the path to scalability, especially in real estate, if you go from single families, it takes 100 single family homes to equal one 100 unit apartment complex with 10 times the amount of work. So I'm like, okay, this makes no sense. So the light bulb went off. So formed Three Pillars, where we, our mission is to find, underserved communities, mismanaged properties, and do a really nice renovation where we can not only get, good increased rent premiums for returns for investors, but we actually are making the communities better places to be, not just your run of the mill, crappy apartment that people have to live in because it's all they can afford. They want to live here and it doesn't cost them that much more.
Yeah. I mean, this is a couple of things. First of all, I have an engineering background myself. I practice engineering and I do house design as well. So this is funny that we kind of all have that similar background, right? But a lot of the things you touched on, first of all, scalability, we talked about that too. And I have a similar situation where my wife and I bought several single families, some small multis, and you kind of, you realize it's a lot of work, like you said, for what it is. So we do love the scalability for sure. It is a different animal. I don't like when people say they're the same because they're not, but it's absolutely more scalable. And then the other thing you touched on is the community aspect. And that's what we just hammer. I mean, that is our main thing that we love about this business is you're truly improving property. And in doing that, you're improving people's lives. And so we love that portion of the business. So what are your thoughts, Ben?
No, I would say the same thing. One of the biggest aspects and the reason that I was really focused on this, Eric and I started investing in some small multifamilies years ago, and that's what brought me into it as well. And really, especially our first project, seeing just what impact it can have on some simple fixes and truly just paying attention. A lot of the properties that we like to get into, and it sounds like you guys, and we'll dig into that, is finding some underserved properties in some underserved areas and doing some really pretty simple things. And most of it is paying attention. And I'd love to kind of get into that a little bit more with you guys about what does that mean and how are you realizing profits while also taking care of people and the tenants? Because community is, like Eric mentioned, is huge for us. And we really have this people first mentality, and we try to preach that and espouse that with all the people we work with. And I think there is some misconception out there about sort of money grabs and, multifamily and things like that. And truly the ability to help people and grow a positive effect in people's lives is pretty powerful. So
yeah, there's candidly, I mean, your last point, Ben, is one I have had a lot of arguments with. I live in a very blue city, and housing politics here is fairly caustic, shall we say. And I just was interviewed last week by a reporter for from the New Republic, which is a left-leaning magazine, and he actually was trying to remain unbiased, but he had a very, very big, left-leaning bias as he was interviewing me. And I was trying to convince him, it's like, look, we're not making gobs of money off of any one deal. It just doesn't work that way. And the perception here in Seattle, especially, is that there's this cabal of landlords out there that get together and set rents, and that they're just taking advantage of all the renters here in town. And it's just not true. I mean, a basic high school economics course would tell you that, we operate in a marketplace, and the market sets the rents, and we're just players in the marketplace, and we're reacting. But that is probably one of the single hardest things I face geographically where I live, and is in large part the reason why I don't do deals on the West Coast anymore. I don't have patience for this, and the profit margins are so thin, and we're trying to do such heavy lifts on these deals to really create a nice asset. To have that additional hurdle in my way, it's just not worth it to me. So
you're not in the boardroom all scheming together, setting rents.
Oh my God!
The evil landlords all get together and say, "This year is going to go up to."
Yeah, we really laugh about this, but that is the actual perception out there, and it is.
I know. I'm making a joke, and you're right.
Yeah, I know.
It's true. I mean, basically the reality is rent prices are set by the market, and what we are doing is improving the property and hitting those rents. Of course, we want to be profitable, but it's not like there's a scheme, and there's a perception, especially lately, that landlords are evil, right? They're like, oh, they're greedy or whatever. And I love touching on it. I don't think we're going to dive too much deeper, but I think you can actually be both.
Yeah, and I think that's a great segue actually to the why and really why we love speaking with people like yourselves who have a lot of experience in the market and have seen a lot of things over the years and have dealt with the highs and lows of the markets and really getting into why value add investing is such a powerful and unique tool to both creating community, but also creating wealth for the people that are investing on that side. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on why value add is such a great place to be.
Yeah, I think it starts, first of all, with what you were talking about, Ben. You got to have a passion for creating community because the headaches aren't worth it otherwise. There's profit in it, but you've got to have a ferocious passion for doing this. And the money's nice, but it's not worth a lot of the headaches if you're not motivated. And so I always come back to that. I love creating, a real nice B-class product out of a D- purchase. And I've got one of those going on in Mississippi right now where I am going to be doing a lot of work, rebranding this property. It's a deep, opportunistic value add play. And we're going to be spending a lot of money per door to kind of renovate this place. At the end of the day, we're creating a really nice community for a market that is in desperate need of additional housing.
So I definitely agree with Mark on that point. I guess I'll speak more to the financial aspect. I mean, the whole reason we, out of all the asset classes you can choose to do, we chose to focus on this one. There's a reason, because, and just speaking particularly to multifamily, right? With A class, you buy something that's new or close to brand new. The only play that you really have is either you can decrease your expenses, improve your operations, and marginally increase the rents because they're already it's brand new. The rents are already where they're going to be, right? And then of course, as appreciation, you bank on to drive the value with it. But on the other hand, value add, these are older assets. Typically, rents are kind of lagging behind where they could be.
Yep.
So there's an immediate value that you can force into the property that's outside the bounds of where the market's heading. It could be going up, down, flat, right? You still can force value into the property if you take something that's old and needs work and you renovate it, you make it nice, and it's something that people want to buy. And it's, marginally more expensive than it used to be, but you're still catering to that same, demographic of people. You can create tremendous value in a short amount of time. You're not banking on the market going up in your favor. You're not banking on rates staying low. There's a lot more variables and knobs you can fine tune to drive the value than an A class or something that's brand new. So that's why we chose value add from a financial standpoint. But the holistic side of it, everything Mark was talking about, I mean, that's totally on the same page there as well.
And a couple of points I'll add to what Josh was saying is, you compare sort of the value add exercise to maybe ground up construction, and ground up development, which I've done plenty of over the course of my career. The risk to the developer is not as great in a value add project. You're forcing appreciation into an existing asset. The timeline for the completion of the project is years shorter. I mean, I'm doing one deal right now. I'm going to renovate 50 units in under 3 months and have that thing back on the market. If I were trying to do a ground up development of a 50 unit asset, even in a small town in Mississippi, that's a 3-year proposition right there. I've got to carry that project for 3 years. I'm going to the hip for 3 straight years. There's just a lot more risk involved in the proposition than there is with the value add proposition.
Right. Well, and I think you make a good point too, is timeline, because there is a very real need in an overwhelming majority of markets for workforce housing and sort of that B2C class housing space. And a 3 or 4 year turn doesn't help people tomorrow. And if you have the ability, and even getting into projects, like Eric and I are working on a few things, and over time we've seen projects that if you turn them in a reasonable rate, you're helping the tenants, you're retaining tenants, but you're also opening up units on a much shorter scale to allow people to get into some housing that is really good for them. As to your point, is waiting for 3 or 4 years. Right. I think that's a good good question and kind of an ask, because there's a lot going on in the world. We're recording this on Friday, December 3rd in 2021. There's still some volatility as it is related to inflation. There's some still worries of inflation. There's still volatility as far as coronavirus is concerned. So I'm curious your insight to why you think multifamily investing is a strong play, why you find it interesting as an investor, and kind of what you see on the horizon there for as far as your investments are concerned.
Well, why don't I take point on that one, Josh? I think, it starts for me, you need to go back 10, 12 years ago to the Great Recession. And construction was taken offline for 3 to 4 years. And so we fell behind in our housing production in this country. Came out of it pre-pandemic. We were starting to get back to pre-Great Recession rates of development. And then bam, we had, this pandemic, which shut everything down for 12 months. So we are, I think, at least hundreds of thousands, if not a couple of million units of housing behind schedule nationwide, which is why you're seeing the rate of home ownership for new purchases go up as fast as it's going up, and the rental rates nationwide going up as fast as they're going up, and the vacancy rates continuing to trend down nationwide. So there's a huge backlog of demand for housing that we're not meeting as a society in this country. And then you layer on top of that the really complex zoning codes that exist on the coast. The most expensive housing, there's no question about it, is in the blue states. And that's where you're going to find a direct correlation between how much regulatory overhead there is for housing production and the cost of housing. So and you can trace the history of zoning back 50, 60 years, and you will see that zoning, by and large, a lot of what zoning was all about is protecting middle-class home values throughout the country. Well, that's coming home to roost now, where we are out of easy dirt to build on. And the environmental regulatory overhead is such that we can't build on the rest of it without a lot of cost. Yeah. So, for us, it just gets back to this value add play. It's like, if I don't want to go and navigate through the maze of planning and backlog of housing and all that, or do I want to just buy something and renovate? And to me, it's just a much easier proposition to go do a value add play and bring quality housing to market much more rapidly.
Yeah. Point I'll add to that, and Mark brings up a lot of good points there. The home affordability is continuing to be something that's further and further out of reach for most Americans.
Yep.
And so, like it or not, it's forcing people that can't afford a home now into renting. And so it's like a runaway train. If you look at the charts of home ownership over the past 5, 6, 7 years, it's pretty staggering. It's almost like an exponential curve, the difference between people who used to be renters that then moved into owning a home. That train is running away. And so it is creating a further demand for our product, and material costs rising like they have. I mean, obviously you can look at the microscope of the time that we're in now and what COVID has created, but this stuff has already been happening before COVID. So just the cost of home ownership itself is another driving force for multifamily to really take off.
Yeah, I'd be curious your thoughts too, also on especially the millennial generation and Gen Z coming behind it. There's also a lot of data that shows that housing starts or even single family homes are less desirable until a later age. And so there's still a lot of people that are looking for this multifamily product, and the ability to build or renovate some of this product that's actually really nice to live in. There's some of these things, like adding some backyards or adding, dog parks, or making it more accessible for a lot of people to live their lives on a daily basis and add convenience. Because a lot of people just don't want that 2-car garage and a giant yard that they want to mow and a lot of those types of things. So I think there is a really interesting question there that I think is being answered just by volume of data. So I think it is on one side, in my opinion, absolutely driven by price, but I think a lot of people aren't looking to move into the suburbs, aren't looking necessarily to move out until a much later time. So it's also driving this need for people to be closer to home in certain cases, but also people don't have to be at home and drive the 20 miles to work anymore either. With the ability to work from home or work remotely, having some of these communities and having some, the ability to be in your space and have amenities like a coffee shop or a dog park nearby, I think that's pretty interesting to people too.
Yeah. I mean, in this era where more and more people are going to continue to work out of the home. I mean, Google just announced they're not bringing anybody back in the office for another year or two. Same can be said for every large tech company where I live in Seattle. So it's not just a choice. People are being forced to work out of their houses. So I know that what we're doing is looking at those particular workers and trying to figure out what it is they need to be able to kind of live a whole life, live, work, play right out of a 2-bedroom apartment. And so we're installing tech packages, Google or Amazon lockers, the dog parks, if we can squeeze in a little workout space in the building, we'll do that as well. I mean, I just foresee this trend going on for a long time. I mean, and not only that, the younger generation's a lot more tech savvy and they have different demands for what they want out of a housing community than older generations do.
That's true. I think it's important that we kind of watch the trends, watch the data. I mean, that's what's interesting about what you guys are saying. It's kind of based in data. I mean, that's basically the last 10 minutes of the conversation was talking about charts and what we're seeing and trying to stay ahead of it. Right. But I mean, it always does come back to people. So I love what you say is like, how can we create a place where people want to live and improve that life? So maybe let's pivot a little bit here. Let's talk about your guys' businesses specifically. So Josh, if you don't mind going first, where you said you're based in Houston, are all your units there? And then, is that where you see the future? I mean, you're going to be in Houston kind of for the foreseeable future.
Sure. So yeah, our company, private equity firm, we raise the money for all the deals we purchase. We own and manage them. And then we also do the renovation component. Obviously part of value add is, renovation. It's a very large component. So we do that in-house. So we're a vertically integrated company. And we chose that model because, we started out third-party managing and realized very quickly it didn't work very well. And a lot of folks that do what we do will say the same thing. That's why you're seeing more and more people bring it in-house because, if you own something and you have the ability to, put in processes and control, you can not only drive your cost way down, but your end product becomes much better. So we found that, we're able to do these renovations for 50 to, 70% cheaper than what it would cost us to go contract it out and hire a construction company. So that was number one. But on top of that, we found that our leasing is way better. We're able to hit our rent premiums much easier. Our downtimes on units are much quicker. So we're not having to sit there and wait a month for a unit to get renovated before we can lease it back up. It's half that time. So all that translates into better return for the investors. I mean, we had just 3 projects this past year where investors are sitting at 100% return on their capital in about 2 to 2.5 years because we're able to do that so quickly and drive all that value through refinancing, distributions, and what have you. But as far as why we chose Houston, we did pick that it was a strategic choice. I'm not from Houston. I moved here. It was because there's such a high density of older asset apartment buildings that hadn't been renovated ever. I mean, we're talking stuff that was built in the 70s and the 80s that literally hadn't been touched in 30, 40 years. Linoleum tile, shag carpeting, like the nastiest of the nasty stuff. And so because there was so few people that had actually owners that had put their hands on it, turned it, sold it, owned it, sold it, right? There's a lot less hands involved. We found this great opportunity of finding apartment buildings to these underserved communities where rents might have been at the time $500, $550 for a 1-bedroom apartment, way under market. We could do a renovation, put in granite countertops, vinyl plank flooring, crown molding, designer lighting, all these really nice things. And we only need to charge, $675, $700, maybe $750 for that same 1-bedroom apartment. So not out of reach for the residents, but we can still make a really good return on that. So, Houston, that's why we chose Houston. So Mark, you want to add your piece?
Yeah, as I've said, I'm based in the Puget Sound and found that, about 3-4 years ago, it was just impossible for me to find any kind of a deal here, much less a profitable one. I mean, the ferocious competition for assets and the amount of unsophisticated capital out there chasing assets was just more than I wanted to contend with. So I spent, quite a while doing an analysis of the country and figuring out where I wanted to land. And I chose Houston specifically for all the reasons that Josh just outlined. It's a very large metropolis. It's the third or fourth largest city in the country, second largest apartment market. Lots of 80s and 70s vintage product that's been untouched. I figured I could always find another C-class deal there to renovate. And so I started doing reconnaissance trips down there, met Josh on one of those trips. And it's, a really good workforce housing town. I mean, I'm from Detroit originally, which is a very blue collar town. Really used to kind of, blue collar workforce. And as far as I'm concerned, that's really what I need in terms of a rental base for my assets. And so, a lot of things aligned for me in Houston. And, the cost of labor down there is a lot more competitive than it is here in Seattle. I mean, a framer up here costs $65 an hour and an electrician is like $125 an hour. So I'm able to really keep my labor costs in check down there. There's no way I can do it up here. So, you see asset prices reflective. I think a lot of people have figured out Houston in the last year. So,
yeah, I mean, there's fierce competition, and Ben and I kind of align with that. So we're both based in Colorado. Kind of similar story where the asset prices and the rents don't add up to any kind of return. So people are playing this like appreciation game, which we think is dangerous. Or I think it's dangerous. You just never know what the market's going to do. To bank on appreciation, I mean, we touched on A-class assets a little bit earlier. You're right. I mean, it's a product where there's not a lot of true value add unless you're really. I mean, the only value you could add is basically customer service or maybe amenities. But the reality is you're not going to drive rents from those things enough to make a difference. So, and then if you're banking again on appreciation, it's just a dangerous game. So Ben and I in our group, we invest mostly in Oklahoma and Texas where we look the most for those exact same reasons.
And I'd say that you're right. And I live in Golden, Colorado, just outside of Denver, and just the growth, not only in multifamily, but also single family. And you talk about unsophisticated capital chasing, and it is really dangerous as well. And people are just grabbing at whatever they can. And unfortunately, there is a lot of money out there, and there's a lot of people just throwing money at the problem. And it's also driving up, like you said, multifamily, but also single family. We've seen incredible changes in the single family and multifamily space here, where it's also not a service to the people that live there either. You talk about like building community and how you actually go about doing it well. And just rent increases through the roof, really for nothing that's changed the product that much either. And I think that's really the downside, is that the goal here is to obviously bring some return to some investors, to do a good job, but to do a good job across the board, to where you are absolutely raising the quality of life for people. And I think that's the other dangerous game, is just throwing money at it and hoping, that in a couple of years it's going to be worth more, and then selling it off while not really doing much to the property
Ben, you make a hell of a good point there. I call that the chasing yield phenomenon, where people are just running from community to community to community to community to community around the country, just looking for yield on a deal. And to me, the analogy I use with that is it's like being a carpetbagger, post Civil War. And I refuse to do that. When I went to Houston, and I know Josh has a very similar mindset about this, is I wanted to taproot down into a community. And I've always had the philosophy, if I was going to go invest in a community, it better be a place where I wanted to live. And, so I really wanted to put my roots down somewhere and just taproot down, and then continue to do deals within that one community, because I knew I'd be tied in and I'd have, a stake in the game. And it drives me insane, this chasing yield phenomenon, where people come in for a couple of years, drive up the the rents on an asset and then get out. And it's just not how I want to do the business. It's not how I'm hardwired. So, and I just think that's not a sustainable business model personally,
Yeah, we actually preach like know the market so well as well. So we see that a lot. Like people, I think, get into this and have this shiny object syndrome as well, where they'll dance around and they'll say, "Oh, I found a deal in Atlanta and I found a deal in Dallas and I found," and that truthfully, I think there's so money to be made, especially in the current market doing that. But I do think, we want to really know and understand markets where we invest as well. So it takes time. It takes a lot of energy and effort to learn those markets.
Yep.
So let's come back really one more time back to vertical integration. So what was it like to grow from, using third-party management into that, and was there growing pains? And I assume you guys have a pretty good staff at this point, if you have all of those things going on.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It did not. We had our fair share of growing pains, and we still have growing pains. I mean, every business goes through that. I mean, you're never done getting better. The more you grow and scale, there's new problems to solve. And so, I would say that the biggest growing pain was really having to quickly figure things out, like the basics, right? Like, okay, how do you hire a good property manager? What do you look for? How do you make sure they're not stealing money? I mean, that happens all the time. How do you make sure you have the right screening criteria so you're not letting a bunch of people that won't pay you after 2 months live there for free for another 3 months? All these things had to quickly get learned. And so there was some growing pains there. But we have now got some regional managers that really help with doing a lot of that recruitment, because they really hone in on those skill sets. And so, I mean, it took a while. I would say it took a good year to 2 years to really get a well-oiled machine. But we've every year since we've really got that piece figured out, at least the basics, right? We've doubled in size almost every year, and that's our goal again for 2022. So once you get it down, then you can really scale, because it takes you half the effort it used to do the same thing. So you can do things a lot faster.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, we talk about processes too, right? So like once you have something that needs to be is repeatable, create a process, right? And then just what you said, the next time you do it, it becomes a little easier. So we think, third-party management, like you said, I think there's kind of a healthy debate about vertical integration or using property management. And it's interesting because on one of our properties, the property manager is amazing. I mean, she's just incredible. Can't say enough about her. And so honestly, I kind of think, well, if we could find that person, in the markets, in all of the markets we're in, I wouldn't want to vertically integrate personally. But we've also, Ben and I own another property where the management team is pretty tough. I mean, we have to have these continuous conversations of like, guys, this is not how it's done. It's just hard, if the manager is not amazing, then I can 100% understand why you'd want to do that. So that's a huge challenge. I mean, you kind of mentioned it, is to find the right manager, and that's proven to be very challenging.
Yeah, it is. And there are some really good management companies out there. It depends on what your niche is. And our niche happens to be the really heavy renovations. And so for that reason alone, it was enough of a motivation to switch, because a lot of these deals just don't work if you try to do what we do, the style of renovations that we do with the granite and all that. You cannot make the prices work, the CapEx spend, and get a good return for investors if you just go contract it out. It's very rare that can work, especially with the prices where things are trading today. You got to find an edge, and you got to find a way to cut down costs. And so again, for that reason, that's why we wanted to go vertical.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, guys, the second half of the show is based on mindset. So we have kind of a series of questions that we'll ask both of you. It's not intended to be a right or wrong answer, so please be honest. But the first question I always ask is, do you have a morning routine? And Mark, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I have a morning and a weekly routine. I find that I have to get up and then get shaved and showered, and then I have to get out of the house. I work out of my house still, been working out of my house for 20 years, run a couple of businesses from the spare bedroom. But if I don't get out and just get, a different perspective in the morning, I just like to get a cup of coffee and a breakfast burrito or something like that. And a lot of times I go for a little drive, and I'm just trying to put my game face on clear my head for the day. And then I come back and I am a voracious consumer of news. So I will spend an hour in the morning, up to an hour, just scanning the headlines, looking for economic data, both locally and nationally. And then I will, from there, get into my day. I have a style of planning my day. There are all these planning apps out there that you can go buy. I'm an old school guy. I use a text pad, a notepad, in Microsoft, and I just keep a ongoing to-do list, I call it. And on that list, I prioritize everything. And I work that thing constantly every day, all day long. So I find that it's one thing to think it, it's another thing to talk about it, but it's a third thing to type it out. And it forces me to internalize that information and really internalize my calendar. And then I use a calendar all day long, all week long. And so I'm planning how I move through my week. Monday mornings or Sunday nights, I will plan my entire week and just figure out what my goals for the week are. What do I have to have accomplished by Friday? And I have found that as I have taken a more proactive and thoughtful role or approach to planning my week, by God, I get a lot more accomplished in a lot less time. And it's a kind of a self-perpetuating thing. Like, I'm a total nerd, I'm both Josh and I went to U of M engineering, and so I love efficiency. Josh will tell you I'm sort of a bizarre creature when it comes to efficiency, and so I just like doing things as quickly as possible, as efficiently as I can possibly do them at a very high level. And so for me, that has once I adopted that, and I've been doing it for years, but I really got thoughtful about it this year. It's like, man, I've got a lot going on and I cannot screw around. I've got to get this done. And so it becomes like a thing for me that I enjoy. It's sort of taken on its own life, and like I said, I'm kind of weird around this stuff, but it really has amped up my productivity. I've gotten a lot more done, and my income's increased. So
that's awesome. Yeah, there's lots in there. Josh, I'll let you go, and then we can touch back.
Yeah. So I find I get a lot more done in the morning than at night. I used to be the other way around when I was younger. I used to get night owls, stay up till midnight doing stuff. Now my brain I get more. There's more things that are firing up here in the morning than in the afternoon. So I've kind of adjusted my lifestyle to accommodate that. So I wake up pretty early, I'm 5:20, and I go to the gym is the first thing I do. So I get there about 6, get the workout done by 7, shower. And then I've got, usually a good 30 to 45 minutes before anybody else gets in the office where I can be planning and kind of reflect on, the day before and the week ahead. And we do, usually we have executive meetings almost every day. So we take about an hour. We have morning team meetings really. And that just kind of really focuses everybody on what the tasks ahead are, so that, it's very easy when you're, running a company kind of, we got almost 100 people now. It's easy when you got people at the corporate office where if you don't touch base with them, people go off and do their own thing and feel like they're working, but they're not really working towards the common goal. And so that's why we're, pretty big on having these meetings, even if it's just to connect with somebody and touch base and make sure that they're rowing the oar in the right direction, even though they're all rowing an oar. But as far as task management, timekeeping and all that stuff, I really like to use, Google Calendars. I can't remember anything. If I don't put it on the calendar, I forget it. It's just, even if it's going to pick up groceries after work, I have to put it on the calendar. And then, for tasks, I just keep a spreadsheet. I just have like to do today, urgent, important, urgent, not important. And I kind of just that way. So it's kind of my way to keep that.
No, I think the thing I take away from that is you guys are intentional, right? So you take the time to write it down, take the time to plan it out. And you're right, Mark. I mean, you mentioned efficiency. That's super true. So, we hear all kinds of answers to that question, of course, but what it comes back to is if you take the time to plan and sort of see where you're headed, it's incredible how powerful that tool is. So however it looks like for you, that's great. And you can tell that you guys are obviously extremely successful in this. And a lot of it probably has to do with planning, looking forward.
Yeah, and I really like, Mark, my brain works similar in such a way that I actually remember it way better if I write it down by hand. Yep. So I still keep an old school planner. I still run my calendar on my computer and still runs through my phone and reminders, but every day I literally write out my schedule by hand based on, I go to my digital calendar and I write it out by hand because then it actually hits my brain. And because of that, I mean, there's this, I don't know if you're one of those guys, but especially talking to architects and engineers, like I've become a pencil guy. Like I carry pencils around instead of pens now because when days shuffle, I actually use that to move my day around. So it's funny, every once in a while I come across somebody that says, I write it down because I remember it better. And that really resonates with me for sure. And people that I've worked with just say, hey man, try it for a week, right? You write it down, whether it's on your phone or in a computer or by hand. And I think that really pushes people to realize what they're doing as well.
It forces you to become very intentional.
Yep.
I mean, and once I realized that, it's like, wow, I can't write stuff down anymore. I was a hand drafter for a lot of years, 20 years, and I've actually ruined my hand. I don't have small motor skills in my writing hand anymore. So I actually have to type. There's a beauty in typing in that it allows me to cut and paste and, kind of reprioritize stuff. So I love that aspect of it as well.
Yeah. Well, with that, there's a lot of ways that I think people have come to intentionality. And we like to ask the same thing. Are there any books or, any other type of articles or any print media or people that have influenced you in your intentionality?
Well, something you'll relate to, Ben, is I've read and reread and actually listened to Hunter Thompson's book, How to Raise Capital for Real Estate, which is, I think, one of the single best reads for the industry out there right now. And talking about intentionality, I mean, the book is just laden with intentionality. I feel like I took my game up 2 or 3 clicks just by, going through that book a couple of times. I listen to a lot of high-level management books from very successful CEOs. So I've been kind of grinding through Satya Nadella's latest read about leadership. I thought that was a very good read. Those are 2 I've been working on recently.
Great. How about you, Josh? Is there anything that pops up as far as favorite books or things that really changed the way that you work?
I really, I don't like to reinvent the wheel if I don't have to. I've really found there's a lot of power in learning by example. So I like to read, success stories, bios, any news articles I can about people that I really respect. Some of the greats like Tillman Fertitta, Mark Cuban, anything that comes out about those guys or how they're doing something unique. I'd love to get my hands on it and read it, read their biographies and all that stuff. But, those people are just geniuses of their own right, but they work their butts off, right? You can be a really smart person and not work very hard and still not do much, right? These people have done it. And so, any glimpse of how I can incorporate what they do into my business, I don't see how it wouldn't work, So that's what I like to do.
Yeah, that's awesome. Gentlemen, I think, I love that Hunter Thompson book as well. That's actually we read it as a group. We did a little book club thing and read it and talked about that book. But I completely agree. It's titled Raising Capital, but it's actually, there's a ton in there in our industry. I think there's a ton to take away way beyond raising capital. So I completely agree. Love that book. Next question we ask is about coaching and mentoring. Have you guys, I know you guys are kind of in the Hunter Thompson group, but have you ever had a coach or mentor that you had to pay for, and was it worth the investment?
I have. I have a lot to say about that, so let me just be concise. I think there's a lot of gurus out there that are posing, and that there's a lot of people with a lot of dreams who are trying to accomplish those dreams. And so the quickest way to do that is to hire a mentor, right? And there's a lot of folks who I think are predatory in that realm. And so I've always sort of been very skeptical about sort of the coaching guru thing. I've done it and I got a lot out of it, and I continue to participate in this one network where I am now like a mentor that people are seeking out. So I don't charge for it. I have a philosophy about paying it forward, and I don't do it on a continuous basis, but I willingly try to help people along. I find I get a lot of value out of it myself. And I just think there's a lot of cowboys in this industry, and there's a lot of predatory behavior. So I would be very careful about that. That said, it's a very powerful way to get from point A to point B if you find a really good mentor who's willing to take an interest in you. But they're far and few between.
I tend to agree. I mean, I talk about this a lot on the show. Is I think a good, high quality mentor or coach is, it's so valuable. But to find the right one can be a challenge. So ask the right questions, make sure that they're the right one. I tend to agree, especially the cost of some of these programs is pretty incredible.
Multiple 5 figures.
Yeah, which is a lot of money, right? So to find the right person, find the right mentor, coach, whatever it is. Josh, what about you?
Yeah, I've done the business coaching thing before. I kind of have a similar experience to Mark. I had one recently, probably had about 7 or 8 sessions, and wound up just not doing them anymore because it became like a therapy session. And so I was like, this isn't what I'm looking for. And like, he kept missing, my goal is to develop as a business professional and, tell me how I'm my own worst enemy and what, that kind of stuff. And it was always put back to like my personal life, which just didn't go anywhere and was really expensive. But I think the best way is the altruistic method. Like if you can find somebody that really has, whether they're trying to pay it forward like Mark is, or somebody that just wants to see you succeed because they'll feel good about themselves by doing that. That has the experience of what you want to gain. That's the best way. It's really hard to find. Because at the end of the day, most people want something in return, even if they won't tell you that. But if you can find that one person that just really wants to pay it forward and wants maybe more experience than you are and sees themselves in you or something like that, right? That's like the best scenario. But again, you really have to search for it.
Yeah. It's super interesting. We talked about community here too, because I've found more so than almost anywhere else, the willingness with some true folks in this space. There's a lot of people that just want to help and that have been in your shoes and are willing to give advice. I think that's what we really like about this podcast also, is being able to have these conversations and put it out for people just to listen to and to experience, through conversation, what people have been in their shoes or have been there before. But I don't think that it's not very often that you have a conversation with somebody in the space who actually is worth their salt that's not willing to help. And that's what I really like about the space too, is that it is a really big community and there's enough for everybody. And I think you can really quickly spot the difference between somebody who has the abundance mindset and understands that there really is truly enough for everybody. And there's enough work to be done in this space for everybody. If somebody has their elbows out and they're really protecting their own private little piece, to me, you can kind of tell where they're coming from and where their head's at. I just appreciate that. And truly, you gentlemen spend your time with us and you share your time, your valuable time to come and speak with us, but also to be able to share this message. Like that to me is speaking some pretty clear truth.
And the pie is plenty big. I mean, we don't have to be hogs about it. Why wouldn't you want to share it? So again,
we talk about this a lot too. Kind of piggybacking on what Ben said, I find that this community is awesome. Like everyone wants to help each other. Everyone wants to cheer each other on. I personally don't find that very often, that people are, not willing to, like Ben said, give advice, share ideas, kind of cheer each other on. And it's true. The pie is huge. And the other thing about that pie thing is partnerships, right? So if the pie is really big and you get a smaller piece of it, that's okay, rather than getting the whole pie, but it's like a little mini guy.
A lot of little pieces adds up to a decent pie itself.
Yeah, yes, it does. It's funny you should mention partnership, Eric. You could do a whole podcast on partnerships.
Oh yeah, we have, and it barely touches on it.
Yeah.
Like partnerships is so valuable. Yeah, you could talk about it forever. And I, personally, I say this a lot too. I kind of fought it for a long time. I wanted to go at it myself and had the single family things. And basically the minute I partnered with someone, that's when things took off, and the sum is absolutely greater than the parts for sure.
Yeah, it is.
It definitely is.
Well, with that, we'll kind of shift gears a little bit, but I think it kind of follows on is we usually ask, what's the biggest mistake you've made in your investing career, or biggest stumbling block, or greatest learning that you've had throughout your career? If you wouldn't mind sharing some tidbits on that.
Why don't you take a point, Josh?
Yeah, biggest one for me is this is probably one of the biggest rookie mistakes early on that I made, is not having a flexible enough underwriting model. Like taking, and again, there's only so much you can really prevent until you kind of get burned a little bit. But like, taking something and saying, hey, I'm gonna renovate 100% of the property in 6 months, and I'm gonna raise my rents 30%. And I found one property that said they did that, so that's what I'm going to do too. And you don't leave any room for economic occupancy or people not wanting to pay you, or all this stuff. And then you completely miss the mark. And if you happen to raise money on it, investors are like, well, you said I was going to get a 40% return. Why is it 15 or whatever? So we learned that lesson pretty quickly, to really fully understand the submarket. You don't just get 2 comps, you need 10, or maybe even more than that. So that you don't hang yourself out to dry and overpromise and underdeliver. I would say that's probably the biggest lesson we learned right away.
That's such an interesting one. And Mark, I'll let you go, but my basically mentor, he's very analytical, super, super sharp guy. And, part of that was going through underwriting. And every time I would find what I thought was a deal, he would take the time to look at it and say, yes, theoretically, this is a deal, but let's talk about the actuality of how this runs out, and look at the P&L. How does occupancy look the first 2 years, and how does that change the deal? Those little nuances were so valuable to learn. It's interesting you say that, because now I feel like, he shared so much of his underwriting skills that I'm incredibly grateful for. Mm-hmm. But it's always those things. I mean, you can make a nice model. If you do them all in 6 months, you're up 30%. You can make money in the property.
Yeah.
But it's not a reality, in most cases. So Mark, What about you? What's a mistake we can learn from?
I've made a ton of mistakes. I think the biggest takeaway I've continued to learn in this industry is humility, and trying to sort of there's a lot of cowboy mentality in the real estate industry. There's a lot of big egos, a lot of alpha personality types. And I have found that the more grounded I stay, the more open I remain to doing, exactly what you're saying. It's like having a bigger mindset about underwriting and not thinking I've got all the answers. I mean, that's very pervasive throughout all of my partnerships. I just try to be very professional with my interactions with folks, but it starts with me, and staying grounded about this. I know when I first got into it, I like a lot of folks was doing it for the money. I had just come off a very expensive divorce and I was damn near bankrupt, and, have rebuilt my balance sheet ever since. And my goals have just, continually changed. Why do I continue doing this? I could sail off in the sunset at this point. It just opens me up further, and I try to become, more analytical, but more receptive to other people's input, I guess. And actually now seeking it out more. So, for me, I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned in this industry is you have to be willing to take in as much information as you put out there or think you understand. And so I constantly feel like I'm trying to learn that lesson on a daily basis.
Yeah, I find that we're like never there. We kind of touched on this, Josh. I mean, you mentioned you're like, it's never complete, right? Mm-hmm. That to me is a sign of a good operator, is to say that I have so much more to learn, and every door I open, there's 4 more behind it. And there's a lot of learning in each one of those doors. Mm-hmm. So like to constantly say the only constant is change, and to just settle into that and settle into, okay, we can continually learn, and that's okay. That's the way to move forward. So that's an incredibly valuable tip. Thanks for sharing. So I think, guys, the last kind of 2-part question we have is, what is your definition of success, and why do you think you are successful as opposed to someone else? So Josh, I'll let you go first on that.
Really success is, it can't be an outward thing. Success isn't something that somebody tells you are. It's got to be something that you feel from within, right? So I think, just to put it simply, success is achieving the goals you've set for yourself. So, whether that's small or big, if you achieve those goals and you're happy with the goals that you set and they were challenging enough and you feel fulfilled, then I think that's success. It was the second part. Why do I feel like I'm successful?
Yeah. Well, I mean, someone asked you, why are you specifically successful? And maybe others aren't. What's your response?
I would say just a lot of hard work and never giving up. I think, you could say, I feel like a lot of people, especially in America, say, okay, well, I want to make this much money, then I'm successful. Well, I'll tell you one thing, you probably get there and then you're going to want more. That target's going to always keep moving.
Yeah.
So I think it really has to be something that you feel fulfilled by achieving. And I think that's where I'm at. I've set a lot of goals, starting this company, certain AUM levels, and I've achieved all of them so far, but there's always going to be more goals to set. So I think just the fact that we're still here and we're doing well and we've scaled so much, that to me is success. And it's not even the dollar sign behind it. It's just the fact that we did what we said we were going to do and more.
That's such a good answer. Mark, what about you?
Yeah. What was the first part of the question again?
Basically, your definition of success.
Okay. Unfortunately, Josh stole the answer right out of my mouth. I guess I like analogies, if you can't tell. So for me, first of all, success is always morphing. You ask me what is success on one day, and it's going to be a different answer from the day before. But I think the one constant for me on the definition of success is when I move the goalposts and society does not. When I am like defining what it is and I'm okay with that and I feel really good about it, I don't have to worry about all these external kind of white noise that goes on out in this very loud, raucous republic that we live in. A lot of what you see on YouTube and, social media is, people in LinkedIn, even, people posting what is sort of, what is supposedly a successful lifestyle or what their definition of success is. And, for me, that's always kind of it's always been a turnoff. I am sort of contrarian by nature. I've been a serial entrepreneur my whole career, and I'm going to be damned if I'm going to let somebody else define what I consider to be success. So I don't want to be obnoxious about it, but I have to, it's when I get to a point, and this sort of leads to the second part of your question, where I'm feeling balanced. Like I don't need a lot of external stuff. I'm kind of an ideas guy. So, toys and, vacation to 5-star resorts and all that, it's kind of meaningless to me. I like doing it when I bring my family along, but, in and of itself, it's not what I'm chasing in life. It's when I feel like I can define what my path is in life and feel really good about it and share that story with other people. I think for me, that's a pretty good success story. And, I don't need a bigger balance sheet or more toys. I just don't need it. So.
Yeah, there's a lot in there to take away. I mean, a couple of things would be like, I hear that response a lot is consistency and hard work, Josh. And I think that's absolutely true. I think a lot of people think like they're trying to find the shortcut, right? And there honestly usually isn't one. For long-term wealth, it's going to be a slow play and a lot of work. And Mark, we kind of hear that answer a lot too, is like kind of define your own destiny, right? So do what you want when you want kind of thing is what I hear people defining success as. And anyway, thanks so much, guys. At this point, just want to say thank you both for your time. This has been a great show. The final question we always ask is how can people get in touch with you? Mark, we'll let you go first, and then Josh, how can people reach out?
You can reach out to me through my website, sgreinvestments, plural.com, and always hit me up, Markich at sgreinvestments.com.
Yeah. For me, you can email at joshw@3pillarscapitalgroup.com. 3 is all spelled out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Thanks, Ben, for co-hosting. That was an awesome show, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for being on.
We really appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Real Estate Mindset Podcast. If you've enjoyed the content today, please follow this show wherever you listen to podcasts. And don't forget to head over to wildoakcapital.com for more information or to connect with Eric directly. Please take a moment to leave a review or tell a friend about what you've listened to today. We hope you'll tune in again soon.